Okay. The topic is the question of the appropriateness of the Shechechiyanu bracha, which is a bracha recited under happy circumstances, and one of those happy circumstances is seeing somebody for the first time after 30 days. Okay, so somebody we care a great deal about, we see them for the first time in 30 days. That's one of the occasions for which the Shechechiyanu blessing would be recited, and the question then is raised: what about somebody? Hello, Shabbat. What about somebody who you may have seen under circumstances like this? You may have seen them on a Zoom call. Would you then say a Shechechiyanu blessing upon seeing them for the first time? So I'll share my screen. I'll show you sort of two sheets we're going to work through. First is, where is it? Sorry, hold on. I guess I'm not ready to share my screen yet. I have to find my, hold on. Here it is, okay. Now I'm ready to share my screen. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and show you two things. I'm going to show you, so this is a tshuva that was written by Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Rimon. He's one of the rabbis in Alon Shvut in Shechechiyanu. And so just the opening question, would you say the Shechechiyanu blessing upon seeing your friend after 30 days? Ulam dibru yachad b'Zoom, but you've had a Zoom conversation, okay? Okay, you want to like the timing here is now, the context is made clear, okay? You had some interaction with them, you've seen their face, you've talked to them, had a conversation over this medium, this strange new technology we've all grown accustomed to. Would that still would that obviate the requirement or the option of saying Shechechiyanu blessing upon seeing them? And I'm going to share with you now. Change my screen. Hopefully this works. So I made a little source sheet based on Rimon's sources, and I can share with you in two different ways. I'm going to share the link with you in the chat box. So all of you, hold on, so all of you now all of you in the chat, you now have the link. So you can open this source sheet and click on the thing. They're all live digital links, so you can follow up and explore and do whatever you want with this, to your heart's delight. So you have it, but my screen is also shared if that ends up being easier for you. Okay. All right. So the first source, this is like the prime source for this this blessing, or how this blessing says brachot nun chet. I'm Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Yeshua ben Levi says, so you see your friend after 30 days, you say, Baruch, blessed is the one who gave us life, sustained us, and brought us to this time. If it's after 12 months, you say, Baruch mechem metim. So let's just, sorry, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to look at you for a moment. Just to sort of make explicit, what's the other occasion that you may say Shechechiyanu blessing? How is this the same? How is this different? You can chat or you can unmute yourself just to. Okay. It's like, okay, you see a friend at 30 days, yeah?
You're referring to fruit? What?
New fruit, that's another example, great. A seasonal fruit, okay? Another classic example, hopefully very recent for some of us, okay? You say it like seasonal mitzvot, okay? The first time, like Kiddush for all the holidays would be, okay, Shechechiyanu blessing. Okay, every Kiddush has a Shechechiyanu. We find with some of these Kiddushes, like Yom Tov Sheni, I don't know, is it really Yom Tov? Maybe the day before is Yom Tov, so the new fruit kind of helps us, covers that. But every Kiddush, Shavuot also, and the only time we don't is the end of Pesach. We don't say Shechechiyanu because that's not a new holiday. It's just it's a Yom Tov, it's a Kiddush, but no Shechechiyanu. But generally, it's like seasonal mitzvah. First time you take a lulav for the year, you say Shechechiyanu. First time you have Hanukkah candles for the year, you say Shechechiyanu. So that's one category, seasonal mitzvah. See a friend in 30 days, that's like that excitement. The new fruit, I don't know, is it like more like the friend? Is it more like the the mitzvah, maybe it's like the happiness of the new fruit. I don't know. Like if you adopt the policy of eating seasonal fruit only, as opposed to like stuff from Argentina, like you get all winter long in the supermarket. So, but like the excitement of like blueberries for the first time in 11 months, that's really exciting. Okay, right? It's coming up another like 2-3 weeks, you can start getting local blueberries, and that's like really exciting. So like that kind of joy maybe is more similar to the friend. There's no mitzvah to eat new fruit, but it is like a really joyous occasion. Another like good news, you say Shechechiyanu blessing as well. This is I titled this a Shechechiyanu moment, because that's something that I encountered when I moved to Chicago. When I started interacting with a lot of liberal Jews, they use that phrase a lot for like really like happiness, the Shechechiyanu moment. We'll say the Shechechiyanu blessing. I think Orthodox Jews are much more reticent to say the Shechechiyanu blessing for circumstances that are not the circumstances that are described in the Talmud and halakhic codes warranting a Shechechiyanu blessing. But I think, as we'll see, just to give away the end, I think there's actually room for a lot more subjectivity. And that really plays out, especially in this particular one that we're exploring, of the Shechechiyanu blessing for seeing a friend you haven't seen in 30 days. I'm going to go back and share my screen again, back to the source sheet. Okay, so Shua ben Levi says, you see a friend, after 30 days, you say Shechechiyanu. After 12 months, you say Mechei Metim. Why is that? What's the Mechei Metim? The best one who revives the dead? Because you haven't seen him for more than 12 months. It's like you don't know if they're alive or not. Or maybe you do know, maybe you don't. It's not that you don't know if they're alive or not, but it's as though they're dead to you because you haven't had any contact with them for 12 months. You don't forget the dead until 12 months. I don't know. There are people who I've loved to have been dead a lot more than 12 months, and I certainly haven't forgotten them. But there's something that happens after 12 months, some degree of forgetfulness after 12 months, and so that's the limit for that bracha. As it says, I am forgotten as a dead man, out of mind. I am like a lost vessel. Okay, and lost vessels, you have to declare them for 12 months. And then there's a story here. Rav Papa, Rav Huna, Beret, Rav Yeshua, Havu Ka'azli. Oops, sorry, I got a little carried away. Havu Ka'azli, the Orcha. So Rav Papa, Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, they were on their way. They were traveling, walking along the road, and who did they come across? Pagube, Rav Chanina Beret, Rav Ika. They met Rav Chanina Beret, Rav Ika. Amruleh, they said to him, because we see you now, we're going to say two blessings. What is it? Baruch shechalach michachmato lireyav. Blessed is the one who gives from his wisdom to those who fear him. This is a bracha for seeing great Torah scholars. The Torah scholar has been given some of God's wisdom, like lireyav, to those who have awe of God. Wow, like God gives some of God's own chachma to them. V'shechechiyanu, because you're our buddy and we haven't seen you in 30 days. He said to them, Ananami, and me too, came into Chazitinchu, when now that I've seen you, Chashbitinchu Ilavai, Kishitin Ribon Beit Yisrael, you are as dear to me, the two of you, as 600,000 people. So I can say three blessings. Hanachtar, the two that you said, and also Baruch Chacham Harazim. That's a blessing that is recited upon seeing 600,000 Jews gathered together, just like Har Sinai. Mount Sinai, 600,000. I don't know when that bracha would ever be said. It's really, really unusual that you would have that many people gathered together, but so be it. That being the case, that's so he says, you're so special, you get an extra blessing, the blessing for seeing 600,000, even though there's two of you. Amrullah said to him, you're very clever, you're too clever. Okay, they glared at him and he died. Okay, so that's that story has a chilling end. I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but this is the source for their basic obligation. If you see somebody for the first time in 30 days, they get a Shechechiyanu blessing. They warrant a Shechechiyanu blessing, that joy. And at 12 months, it's a Mechei Metim, the one who resurrects the dead, because they were as though they were dead, or you didn't know if they were alive or not if you haven't seen them in a long time. I would say that chilling tale at the end, where who was it? Rav Chanina bar Ravika, who dies because he's sort of flippant with these blessings, and he, not just flippant, he that's the wrong word. Yeah, a little flippant and overly subjective, right? He's saying, I care so much about you, I'm going to say an extra blessing, like that costs him his life, that kind of flippancy. No, like you can't just make up things, okay? You can't just say, oh, I'm as happy as though you were 600,000 people. That's how important you are to me. You can't do that. And in the end, It's just the two blessings are appropriate here, and he pays with his life for being so flippant. So this maybe would suggest against being too subjective about this blessing. Okay. Questions, comments on this before we move on? Right. I have a question, and again, you can always ask questions in the chat if you come up with them. I have a question. Has anyone ever said this blessing from seeing a friend in 30 days? I was talking to somebody today earlier in the week who said that he does. Really close friends who he hasn't seen in a long time. He says a Shechechiyanu blessing. I have to confess, I've never in my life said this blessing upon seeing a friend for the first time. As any of you or know people who do? No, I see nods. I mean, shaking heads. Anyone? Yeah. So, okay. So let's just jump ahead, and how did I? Oh, look at that. The source has got reversed order. Hold on. Move that down. There we are. Second source. Okay. Here's our, this is, second source is, thank you, Sarah. Second source is the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so we're jumping ahead 1,000 years. And he says, okay, so Shulchan Aruch brings this story from the statement from the Talmud, from Yeshua ben Levi, and the story that follows, and clear, black and white halacha, we do this, we say this blessing. He then adds, this is if you, both of these blessings actually are there in the Shulchan Aruch, this is what you should do. And he adds that it's really if you're really, really happy if you see them. So it's not just, you can all, I don't know what that would mean, a friend of level 6 and above, like of happiness, it's like when you go to the, when you go, if you're like at the doctor's office or the hospital, they say, how much does this hurt? And they give you that chart of people frowning who are really upset. Oh, there's a baby here. That's so sweet. So you, like how on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does it hurt, right? Right? So I guess is like, how happy are you? Like, how big is the smile when you see this person? It's very hard to rate feelings on a scale, right? He says you're very, very happy. So I would say, that's true. I would say though, there are gray areas always, but gray areas don't mitigate the existence of black and white, okay? So that is to say, there may be challenging there may be challenging questions, right? Of what to do in what circumstance, how happy am I? But challenging circumstances don't mean that there aren't obvious cases, okay? That's true of everything, right? There are moral dilemmas that are really hard. There are gray areas that are really challenging, ethical dilemmas of all kinds, but that doesn't mitigate against the fact that, sometimes some things are very clear. So I would say there might be hard to figure out who do you care about enough to warrant this blessing, but that doesn't mean that there might not be joy that's really significant that would warrant this blessing that's obvious. Okay. Mishnah Berurah, this is now 20th century, who points out, the Char Shoshim Yom, Muriyah Rishonah, so it's 3 days from the first, from the prior sighting, okay? This makes me have to clarify that. Im ki beli menum katav, oshanashim hodiohu mishlomo, yesh diod machronim, b'safek bracha l'hakel. So there's some who say that if in the interim you had some correspondence with the person, then you would not say the blessing and this suffix bracha l'hakel. So I'm going to stop screen share so I can just look at you in the eye more. Okay, a couple of significant things from, and I guess also a few new people have joined, so I'm going to just share the source sheet again in the chat. Okay, oops, sorry, that didn't work. I'm going to share the source sheet a second time in the chat because I think if you joined late, you wouldn't have been able to see, okay? So two significant things the Mishnah Berurah says. The first thing the Mishnah Berurah says that's really important to know, that we wouldn't have known otherwise, is that A, this is a bracha he thinks we still say, okay? And even though none of us said this bracha, okay, the Mishnah Berurah thinks this is a bracha we should say because he's giving us practical guidance on the circumstances for saying this bracha. Second thing he says is that Some say this bracha is this obligation or opportunity to say the bracha is taken away by knowledge, by contact with the person in the interim, and okay, and therefore he says safek bracha lahakel. If in any case of brachot where there's some doubt of whether the bracha should be said or not, we're lenient, which generally means we don't say the bracha. We're going to come and explore that in a moment. But I see Rosalind is raising her hand. Do you want to unmute yourself and say something? I'll unmute you. Do you have something to say? A question or comment?
I think I accidentally raised my hand.
Okay. All right. Well, fine. Okay. Well, feel free to raise your hand again if you. I think I can lower your hand. There you are. Okay. You muted again. All safe. Okay, but feel free to say something. So that's the significance. So the Mishnah is telling us these would be two significant things. One is he's saying this bracha is live and you should say it, but it's undermined by contact in the interim. Safek bracha lahakel is a general halachic concept that exists pretty broadly. Whenever there's a doubt whether bracha should be said, we don't say it. We're lenient in cases of any doubt. So what would be a case? What would be an example of that? Classic example would be, I don't know if it's a mitzvah at this moment or not. I have some question about whether there's a mitzvah right now to do X or to do Y. So I wouldn't say a bracha. Like, why would be, maybe I did this, maybe I did the mitzvah already, maybe I didn't. I can't remember. Did I already count Sfirat HaOmer tonight? Okay. Or does this, I'm not sure this door requires a mezuzah or not, okay? Right? I don't know if there's a mitzvah here or, per se, or if I'm obligating this mitzvah for one reason or another. So, safek bracha, there's a safek about the bracha, so don't say the bracha. What's the flip side of the bracha? Like, why should I be careful? What's the risk? The risk is like taking God's name in vain. We're very cautious against unnecessary brachot because they all entail God's name, and so that's a source of anxiety about saying unnecessary brachot. There's the joke about the man who was the Jewish man who was accosted by a robber on a Shabbos evening, and he didn't have any money, and the robber stuck him up and said, "Your money or your life," and he said, "I have no money with me. It's the Sabbath. So in that case, I'm going to kill you." And he loaded his gun and pointed it at this Jewish man who then, said a bracha for sanctifying God's name. Shechechiyanu al kiddush Hashem. And the robber was like kind of weirded out, and he was like, "All right, whatever," and like walked away and spared the guy's life. And he was left there going, he couldn't talk because he had said the blessing, but he went, all right. Anyway, we're very anxious about saying brachot, right? We get anxiety. Okay. All right. And Zoom, no one can hear if you laugh or not. All right, let me go back to sharing the screen and see the next source. Okay, Aruch HaShulchan says something different. Aruch HaShulchan is Mishnah, because just some basic biography. Just first source we saw, right? This is the Talmud in Brachot. Yeshua ben Levi is a Tana, so that he's alive around whatever in the 1st or 2nd century of the Common Era. Shulchan Aruch is written in the 16th century in Sfat. Mishnah Berurah is written in the early 20th century in Lithuania, and Aruch HaShulchan is also early 20th century, also in Lithuania. Mishnah Berurah is much more, I would say, abstract, elitist in his halachic reasoning. The Aruch HaShulchan is much more practical. He was a congregational rabbi, community rabbi, as well as a scholar. And Aruch HaShulchan describes what people did, right? So if you would, like the big revolution in halakha of the 20th century is maybe a shift from the Aruch HaShulchan to the Mishnah Berurah. Aruch HaShulchan is very, traditional, meaning whatever people do must be correct. And my job as a rabbi is to justify and use my scholarship to explain and justify what people are doing. The Mishnah Berurah, he feels, my job, is much more modern rather than traditional. He's sort of a post-rupture and reconstruction world, and he's operating like text-based Judaism, and the job as a scholar is to figure out what the ideal way of practicing is, and then I can explain it and describe what to do and tell people what to do. Okay, so it's a very long, lot of scholarship. That was like a 2-sentence summary of some great scholarship, and history of modern Judaism. Anyway, Aruch HaShulchan says, but great halachic code. Harod chavero shechaviv alav v'semech riyatoma. Oh, you see somebody you're very happy. Im yesh 30 yom, if it's 30 days. Shorei, if you haven't, since you've seen him, you say the Shechechiyanu blessing. B'shem malchut, say it for real, right? With God's name, Melech haolam, the full blessing. V'mlorehu b'shnei masayim. It's been 12 months. Mevorech mechem etim. You say the mechem etim blessing. It's been 12 months. You guys any mevorech, then you'll say Shechad. Okay. V'zeu kishlo haya michtavim imenu alav. This is there haven't been letters, correspondence in between. But kishiva imenu michtav ein mevorech mechem etim. Aval inyan Shechechiyanu ein chiluk. Afilu kibel michtav toch shloshim mevorech Shechechiyanu. Shadech HaShulchan adds something which the Mishnah Berurah left unclear, and maybe this is different from the Mishnah Berurah. He's saying there's a difference between these two blessings, even though they're taught the same, by the same person in the same source, they have different rules. When it comes to the Shechechiyanu blessing, it doesn't matter if you had correspondence during the intervening days. When it comes to Mechayim Eitim, the blessing isn't said if you had correspondence. Because if you had correspondence, you got a letter from the person, you talk to them on the phone every 2 weeks, you know they're alive. So you finally see them, it's not like a big surprise, a happy surprise that they're still alive, because you spoke on the phone a few weeks earlier. When it comes to the Shechechiyanu blessing, it's not about knowing they're alive, it's about the joy of seeing somebody, okay? Hi mitoch simchat re'iyah panim bepanim, okay? It's the joy that comes from, I keep it's the joy of seeing them face by face. Okay, so there are two different animating sources for these blessings. Mechayim Eitim is recited because you discover that someone's alive, and Shechechiyanu is the joy of seeing someone face to face. So if you know he's alive because he sent you a letter, or you know that he's alive because somebody came and said, "Oh, I just came from Minsk and I saw your friend and he's alive and well and wishes you well." Okay, so then you finally go to Minsk the next week. You don't say the Mechayim Eitim because you know that they're alive. Okay. But the Shechechiyanu is not about knowing they're alive. The Shechechiyanu blessing is about the joy when you see them face to face. Okay. So the language of the Aruch HaShulchan is seeing someone face to face. So the question, I'm going to switch screens now. The question that Ramon is addressing in this essay is, what about seeing somebody face to face over Zoom? Does that in the intermediate? So not whether you would say Shechechiyanu if you're seeing someone's face for the first time, that he doesn't say, but whether having seen someone on Zoom in the intermediary 30 days, would that take away the ability to say Shechechiyanu if you see them in person? So I'm going to stop sharing screen and look at your faces. Just any it was up to you. What do you think? Just without seeing what we've seen so far in the sources, there's not that much additional to see. Seeing what we've seen, what would your instinct tell you? Your halachic instinct, your ritual instinct, what would it tell you? You can feel free to unmute yourself or post in the comments.
I think that it seems pretty clear. You do say it for lots of reasons. Like you wouldn't say Mechayim Eitim if it's a year, God forbid. But I think we've seen that, like that Safek Brachot Lehakel and like Kol V'chomer, like this is a situation where you haven't seen him.
So even though I'm seeing your face right now, and I'm right, that doesn't count. You all know that I haven't shaved since Purim. Okay, like it's not a surprise. Why is this not good enough?
Well,
it's not good. It's just.
I think we feel it. Like there's something in the Kishka. Like there's humans need contact, and this is not it. It led me to think about like this isn't what you're saying. Like if you see somebody on Zoom, that like then you definitely don't say it. But like I was thinking about like how like you're supposed to say Shas Anisim in Hanukkah if you see lights, not even if they're your own lights, and like in the era of Facebook where everybody posts their Hanukkah candles. Like there's like a kind of a similar question, like does the internet count? And I think there's like something in the like overwhelmingly like it's probably no. Like you don't say Shas Anisim when you turn on Facebook.
Right.
I'll be in a lot of trouble if like you take your phone in the bathroom, etc. But like, it's not like the internet is like, to paraphrase me, like the internet is not is a mirror, but it's not reality. And I think that we're realizing that.
Yeah. So anyone else want to offer a thought or?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that, which is that I think it's definitely important that we to say it live, because it reminds us then that I think that I know I have felt every time I'm with someone live, I never forget the difference, but I think it's important ritually to remind ourselves of the difference. And to actually have this framework that can help us do that by sticking to it in a narrow definition of it can only be live.
That's nice. I would say, if you remember when we first went to lockdown, whatever, like the first couple of Zoom calls, maybe a few days later, right after the most acute and frightening and new, right? It was like a real relief to see someone's faces. I remember like constantly saying at those first shul board meeting, like after we'd been closed for like, I don't know, a week or so, and be like, wow, like it's so nice to see your faces. I miss seeing your faces. That was like kind of cliche, like it's so nice to see your face after not seeing anyone's face, right, for so long. So that was a phase. So there is like, this technology allows something special and powerful that, of like the power of the human face, and that immediate, which is different from like, imagine if we had to go through this 10 years ago, right? Even 5 years ago, with this technology was not. 5 years ago, maybe it existed a little bit, but 10 years ago, it really didn't, right? And 15 years ago, right? Or 20 years ago before the internet, right? Which all could have happened, right? And yet, like after being on Zoom for 3 months, right? And then you see somebody, at a safe social distance across the street, it's something really, like your heart quickens, right? And imagine it's like, I'm sure we all have, right? You're like dearly, like beloved relatives and friends, right? Who we care so much about, and we haven't been able to visit them. We had planned on visiting, they had planned on visiting us, et cetera. So I think that all pushes towards saying it. So my instinct sort of lies in the same way. We have to sort of tease out, though, is that sort of the meaning of Safek Bracha L'Hakel in this context, because normally Safek Bracha L'Hakel means don't say the bracha. So we have to sort of, here you want to say, well, maybe it's a Safek, you saw their face or not, maybe we should say the brachas. Here the L'Hakel, to be lenient, is pushing us towards allowing one to make the bracha, when normally being lenient in context of brachas is don't say the bracha, like do the mitzvah or not, but don't say the bracha. So we'll have to look at that. The precedent for this case, I mean, before there was Zoom, there were television, right? And so you could have a situation where somebody whom you care a great deal about, a good friend, is interviewed on TV, or maybe is a celebrity or something, or whatever, is interviewed on TV is a whatever, and so you see them on television interviewed as an expert witness, as a man on the street, whatever, and then you see them, and it's been 30 days since you saw them in real life, but you saw them, like their face, talking to you on TV. So this could have been anytime in the last 50, 60 years, that could have happened. Rav Ovadia Yosef discusses that case, and go back to share. I'll share my screen again, sorry. I have to take you with me as I switch windows. Yeah. Rav Ovadia Yosef, so first of all, he did telephone. So Rav Ovadia says, you say the Shechechiyanu blessing. Rav Ovadia Yosef, just again, he died in 2015, I think, 2014, I believe. Very important Sephardic posek, Sephardic rabbi, lived most of his career was in Israel. That's where he died, and wrote about every halachic topic. And So he says that the Shechechiyanu blessing is said. You would say the blessing. Here's his language. It's Shero'ehu b'mo einav v'samach b'kirvato elav. Okay, you see him with your own eyes, and you rejoice in being close to him. And that really wouldn't right. That wouldn't really be like fulfilled by talking on Zoom. Certainly not like a TV. TV is one direction. Zoom is two directions. You have a conversation, so maybe that's a little more intimate. Maybe that should count for more. But certainly like the lower level exchanges would not exempt one from the Shechechiyanu blessing. So the next piece that everyone brings in, we can go back to the source sheet to sort of see. So this is where'd it go? Oh, sorry. My source sheet got moved out of order because I keep pushing buttons. Okay. This is the Bach. The Bach is I believe it's Bach, and the Bach lived. He was I forget. I'll tell you. Bach lived. He lived 16th century. 16th century. Okay, died 1640. Okay. So he wrote a commentary on the Torah. So a very important halachic work, and from Poland, I believe, Central Europe. Okay, whatever, Krakow, Poland. Okay, so he. Okay, the Bach says, "Well, if he." אני ידעתי, דאיקה לחלק בין ברכת שהחיינו לשאר ברכות, זה ברכת שהחיינו שבא על שמחת ליבו של אדם, יכול לברך אף על פי שאינו ודאי תחייב לברך. Okay, Shechechiyanu bracha is different from all other blessings in that you can say it even in a case where it's not clear that it should be said. For one doesn't violate the lo tisa, don't take God's name in vain. If you're happy, okay, you're really happy, and you say a blessing to God that God sustained you and kept you alive until this happy occasion. That's not a bracha in vain. It's not even if it doesn't fully conform to the circumstances of some like precedent of when this blessing was said. If you actually feel the emotion, then it's not a blessing in vain. Avakan, in our case, which was talking about, I forget, some other, I think it's a tefillin blessing. Okay, a mitzvah blessing, which has the language of, blessed is God who sanctified us with God's commandments and commanded us to X, Y, Z, etc. Pshita dekevan deika suffik en yachol levarech v'lamar tzivanu to have a suffik bracha levatala dasor. If you're not sure that you were commanded in this mitzvah, you can't say a bracha for being commanded to do that mitzvah. That raises the possibility of saying God's name in vain. To say Asher Kidshanu V'Tzivanu, sanctify us with the commandment of X, Y, Z, and X, Y, Z. You're not really sure as a suffix whether that's true. Did I already count Sfirat Omer, right? Or I missed today. Maybe I no longer have the ability. Maybe the mitzvah's done. So I'm not going to say a bracha Asher Kidshanu Sfirat Omer because maybe I don't have a mitzvah anymore. So I use God's name in that context, taking God's name in vain. But if I'm actually happy and I'm thanking God out of my happiness, there's no use of God's name in vain in this context at all. Okay, so the Bach is saying that Shechechiyanu blessing it's an inherently subjective blessing, and that subjectivity means that the normal dynamic of Sefek Bracha L'Hakel, of being lenient and therefore not saying brachot under questionable circumstances, doesn't pertain to this blessing altogether. And if we have the feelings, we can say the blessing. There's a story of one of the, I'm going to stop sharing so I can look at you. So there's a story of one of the early, okay, I'm going to ruin this. I think that's, I don't know exactly what the circumstances of the story, but it's a situation similar to this story that I will tell you, okay? There's one of the religious Jews who was present when the state of Israel was declared, recited a Shechechiyanu blessing. And afterwards, somebody like accosted him and said, how can you say a Shechechiyanu on this, on a declaration of independence? Like, a declaration of independence is not described in the Talmud as an occasion that warrants a Shechechiyanu blessing. And he responded, oh, don't worry, I'm wearing a new necktie. So that's why I, saying the, so it's sort of, it's a funny, right? It's sort of like wearing a new garment. That's, a new house, a new big purchase, a new garment, piece of clothing. That's really significant. That's clearly a precedent for saying Shechechiyanu blessing. But it's probably, for most of us, it's probably the joy is much limited than like many other joyous occasions that we might experience over the course of a year, right? So the Bach is telling us, don't be too worried. Like, the blessing is meant to be subjective. That's the point of the Shechechiyanu blessing. If you feel the joy, you get to say the bracha. And another example of that is, let's share my screen again. This is the blessing of, the Mishnah, the Shulchan Aruch says that you say a Tov Meitav blessing when in the birth of a son but not a daughter. This goes back centuries and reflects a patriarchal society in which, I guess, sons were more economically valuable to families. Daughters were, expensive. You had to collect a dowry for them, marry them off, and there was a lot more anxiety and worry. And sons were an economic boon, or whatever. So this Mishnah Berurah writing says, nearly pashut de pam rishon shiroeh ota mivrech birchat Shechechiyanu. Okay? Demigar mishared chaviro le'achar shloshim yom. V'samach b'riyata mivrech Shechechiyanu kidlacham. Okay, so seeing a new daughter, the Mishnah Berurah says, for the first time, is no less of a reason to say a Shechechiyanu blessing than seeing a friend you haven't seen in 30 days. So he's sort of saying, whatever joy that, if joy of level X warrants Shechechiyanu when you see a friend you haven't seen in 30 days, so certainly seeing your brand new baby daughter is at least that much joy, and therefore also warrants the blessing. And now, which is also suggests, this is Rav Imon's read of this. The source is really saying that actually it's subjective. Okay, these are not conditions for all these things we've studied: 30 days, letters, not letters, face, not. None of these are t'naim. They're not conditions to allow us to say the blessing. These are all descriptions of the level of joy that should let us say the bracha. So a new daughter, certainly that level of joy is above level 6, whatever. You have a really big smile on that smile chart they give you, smile to frown chart they give you in the hospital. Okay, you're really, really happy. So you say a Shechechiyanu. And seeing a friend for the first time in 30 days, that also is in that ballpark. If it's a really a beloved relative, a really close friend. And so Rav Rimon concludes that based on that, wrong window. He concludes that based on that demonstration that the Shechechiyanu blessing is meant to be subjective, and we see it applied subjectively insofar it is said for a new daughter, but it's not said for seeing a friend for the first time. What if there's somebody whom you've corresponded with, right? And you've never met them, and you see them for the first time. That you would not say Shechechiyanu blessing for, right? So somehow and yet you would see it for your daughter whom you've never met before, okay? So again, it's not about t'naim, it's not about conditions, it's about degree of joy. So he says, and this is really for us, someone asked why the person you haven't met, why is that not good enough? I think it's not someone you haven't met, it could be, let's say there's someone you, an artist you admire, a scholar you admire, and you correspond with them for years and years, and finally you travel to Nepal and you go and visit them and whatever, and that's really, really exciting. So, I don't know, so maybe that would be really, really exciting to see them for the first time. And there are descriptions of people meeting mentors for the first time. Rav Kook, he had a student, the Nazir, David Cohen, who was a young student searching for a mentor, and he came to finally met Rav Kook and heard Rav Kook davening Shachrit, and he waited outside the Beit Midrash. Rav Kook was praying, and he realized this is going to be my Rebbe. Like I've met, my mentor at this moment, and that encounter changed his life. He was his devoted disciple for the rest of his life. So you can meet somebody for the first time and it'd be really profound because because of the anticipation and the relationship that exists. But somehow that's different from being reunited with a friend. There's a different kind of primal joy from being reunited. Right? Meeting for the first time, that's when I admire. Now I get to meet them. But being reunited with a friend, that's a happiness, right? Which is really different than the satisfaction of meeting somebody you've wanted to meet a long time. I think that's sort of how I would maybe understand that distinction. But the new daughter, that is happiness, right? That's joy for the new daughter. So this concluding paragraph is, I think, relevant for us because I think when we started, no one was willing to admit to saying this blessing ever in the past. So he says, even someone who's not accustomed to saying a Shechechiyanu, okay, when seeing a friend, which is all of us, unless you're keeping it secret, our strange, unusual new circumstances, we've been stuck in our homes for such a long period of time, that it creates this reality where most people are very, very happy to see their friends in real life. If this is really true, that would be a very, very good reason to say the Shechechiyanu blessing. Okay, even if we haven't said it up until now in our lives, even being reunited with close friends, even seeing relatives for the first time in many months, we haven't said it. Maybe we should start. And maybe this experience has taught us, just how much we need and cherish, real non-online interactions. How seeing someone's face, even having a conversation with somebody we can see one another's faces, doesn't replace in-person interactions. And here's a bracha that our tradition provides for situations just like this, okay, where their tradition recognize, and just in ancient times, this was much more acute, right? Because you never knew when you would see, even in ancient times, 100 years ago, our great-grandparents who moved to America, you left, the shtetl in 1895 to come to America, the people you left behind, you probably would never see them again. And if it happened that you did see them again, it was an unexpected, unhoped for, right? Reuniting, and that's an incredibly powerful joy. So I think hopefully, please God, in the coming weeks, coming months, we'll have that joy as well. We'll get to be reunited in real life and not online with parents and siblings and children, really close, beloved friends whom we haven't been able to see. And stop share. And when that happens, the Shechechiyanu blessing seems very, very appropriate. And maybe this moment teaches us, long into the future, maybe we should continue to say it when we see people in real life. Now, it should. Now, I guess the awkwardness, and he discusses this in his tshuva. The awkwardness, what if the joy isn't mutual? Okay, what if you see somebody and oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you. I'm going to say the bracha, the Shema Malchut, and sing. And you're like, okay, great. You don't feel quite that same. So I don't know. That's risky, I guess. What if you see a group of people? Maybe you go back to shul, you go back to work, you see your colleagues again for the first time, and you really have. So maybe you say one bracha for a group of people. Maybe it covers the ones you're very happy to see and the ones you're not as happy to see. They always, the potential for awkwardness is always there in life. You can't live life without avoiding the potential for awkwardness. But I think when it's but I guess it's like what I said before. The existence of gray doesn't mean that black and white don't also exist. Okay, there may be some gray areas where I don't know. Really, so how happy am I really to see this guy who sits next to me in shul? Okay, it's nice, but okay, how much do I really, really care? But there's some people it's really obvious we really do care. right? And I think for those people, the Shechechiyanu blessing is warranted. Again, to summarize, it seems that this bracha, unlike Mechayim Eitim, is not contingent on contact and knowing they're alive, is with the joy of seeing them. And we saw from Avadia that it's not just like hearing their voice, or it's actually like the intimacy of being proximate that animates the bracha. And we saw from the Bach that this bracha is subjective, and that we can be, unlike other brachot where we're really, like there is a real risk on the other side if we say it where it isn't absolutely mandated. Shechechiyanu, maybe we're not commanded, so maybe we shouldn't say. This is a blessing for joy. If you feel the joy, then it could be said. So I guess for me, this has taught me to have a little more respect for, the Shechechiyanu moments that are always imposed on us in, liberal Jewish spaces. And my kids' school always say it's a Shechechiyanu moment. I'm like, I don't know, like whatever. I guess I can still push back on those moments, because if somebody's getting up and telling you this is a Shechechiyanu moment, it's not a Shechechiyanu moment. You know what I mean? Like if someone has to tell you, feel happy, and we're so happy, feel like, no, like the point, it's like, if the joy should be so great and so obvious that sort of bursts out of you. And then it said, on the other hand, in defense, I guess on the other hand, apologize for this tangent, and I'll end. The counter, the opposite blessing of Dayan Hamet, of sadness, right? You say that when someone dies, and traditionally this was said like you're there at the person's deathbed when they die. You would tear your garment, and say the Dayan Hamet bracha. And generally this got pushed back towards either the funeral or the burial. And the justification is like that's the moment of greatest sadness, not when you first hear about the death, but like the immediacy of, or the reality of I'm about to walk out and confront everyone at the funeral, like now it's real in a way it wasn't before. Or the grave is in the ground, and the thud of the dirt on the coffin, that like makes it real in a way it wasn't before. So that is precedent for a bracha being like kind of a bracha that really should be generated by a spontaneous feeling of grief. Is sort of, we pinpoint the moment when we expect you to feel the greatest grief. And so maybe on the flip side, there might be a space for someone to say, it's a Shechechiyanu moment, so it's all, it's a joyous occasion. Someone has to name it and to point it out and kind of clarify those feelings. So in defense of all those people who notice Shechechiyanu moments, maybe that's how you can understand it. But again, certainly I'd say in those spontaneous moments, we should merit to have them. So any questions or comments? I'll just share either in a chat or in real life.
Do you think you'll say it?
I think it will. I think I will. I was sort of right now making like very preliminary plans of maybe seeing my mother in another 3 or 4 weeks, possibly. And I have not seen her since early March. And so I think that's going to be like an emotional reunion for me and for our kids. And I think for my mother, I think we'd say it. I have not been saying it when I've like I do see people, like people, like like you walk in Lakeview, we see people, and it is really happy, and like, these are people I care a great deal about, right? Members of the congregation, members of the community. I'm really, really happy to see them, but I haven't been saying it, even though it's been for some of them 30 days or more. So I don't know. So I guess, that's sort of interesting. I somehow it didn't, it's like, it seemed happy, but also too fleeting and, and not quite. Yeah, so I don't know. That's where I also have them feeling right now. Like it's not. I think maybe we imagined, a few months ago there would be some like grand reopening. We'd all like one day they would announce, okay, everyone can go back to normal, and we'd all pour into shul, hundreds of us, men, women, and children, old and young, and we'd all go back to our offices and we'd see everyone again, all our buddies, and like in a case like that. So obviously you say the Shechechiyanu, like everyone together is like so super happy. And it seems instead it's going to be a little bit more slow, and starts and fits and back and forth and gradual, and and so maybe it's going to be a little harder to know like what are the moments of joy to like take. And so I think when I see my mother, I feel like that's going to be a moment of joy to like solemnize with the bracha. And I think with others it'll be it's not quite as clear to me. I don't know, maybe the first time we convene as a minyan, that seems really significant. First time we have a non-online shiur, that seems like a really like happy moment. So we'll see. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
Well, I think that you, by I don't know, by giving space and credence to the subjectivity, you also then soften the fear of the person who suddenly is thinking, has it been 30 days or has it been 29?
Right.
Like that whole getting caught in the loop of being fearful that who really knows? I mean, I don't think it would have been so different then. How do people really know exactly how many days it's been since they've seen someone?
Oh, that's interesting. Right. Well, I guess, look, I know we closed the show on March 13th, right? Like that date I will not forget. Right. I know that, I know it's been, I guess, 52 days since Pesach, and we're already closed on Pesach. I know we were open on Purim. So I guess there's certain like liturgical markers about like where I might have seen somebody or not. And, right, I know like we didn't have guests on Pesach, right? So I know anyone who would have come for Pesach didn't come, and we haven't seen them yet, right? So that there's certain ways to know. So, but you're right that I guess if the excitement is as though it has been 30 days, even though it's only been 20, like there's no harm done, right? If you really feel that degree of joy, right? And that's sort of like kind of allow yourself to feel that joy and spontaneity and kind of express it with gratitude towards God. Like that's sort of significant. Yeah.
But I also appreciate the delineation that you're making, because I never felt comfortable with as somebody who grew up and was in school in liberal Jewish settings, like the whole Shechechiyanu moment thing, I've never liked it. And it always felt to me like it was everything would become a Shechechiyanu moment. That's how it felt, like every moment became a Shechechiyanu, which is great because every moment is a Shechechiyanu moment. But then if every moment is, no moment is.
Exactly.
So yeah. I appreciate I understand that there's a fine line, and by you modeling, even in your own thinking about saying it, Bezrat Hashem, when you see your mom, but not with other people, like that's a subjective decision. You don't, it's not for me to understand. I can empathize, but to exactly understand, but to model that there's a certain kind of emotionally rigorous thought that's going on in delineating when yes and when no.
Yeah. I think it's that thank you. And that's a helpful framing, I think, because like so much of like a critique of halachic life is that it takes away the possibility of real, and going back to Paul, right? And critics of halachic life since then, that it takes away from the spirit. It takes away from actually feeling things and knowing what you feel and being like spontaneous and genuine in your religious devotion and your love of your fellow person, right? Because everything is legalized. Like legalism is like that great criticism, right? But I think actually what we're trying to do is to use these legal frameworks to like channel our feelings and to define them, and right, and also using these frameworks to train us in how we should feel about things. And maybe it's also like, if you care about somebody and you haven't seen them for 30 days, like that should be the level of joy at least as great as a new fruit or a new garment, or right, or buying a new car, right? Or a new holiday, right? Like that's, and you should feel gratitude towards God in that joy, right? So I think there's like a, hopefully when it works well, a positive loop between thinking about things halachically with rigor and with precision, and our emotional life, which can then be channeled and given expression and given a religious framework through those halachic frameworks, which then can also then help us like train our emotions as well to like be like, how should a Jew feel in the world? Like going through the world at a time like this, what should a Jew be feeling? Observing what we observe, and right, and taking in what we take in. So I think the liturgy can be, and the halacha more broadly, can be a training for how we ought to be feeling as well. So I think that's maybe like a positive cycle. Right. Any other? So just say that the Shavuot teaching is always my highlight of the year. It's like my favorite teaching that I do, and sad to have missed it on Shavuot, but thank you for joining in tonight. So I got to have that experience. If you have other thoughts or questions, please circle back in the coming days. I'd love to be in touch with all of you, and hopefully eventually see you in person and learn with you in person. So, and thank you, Cantor Berkey, for helping to organize all of us tonight and all of our teaching. So,
Thank you very much for teaching and participating.
thanks. All right, good night, everyone.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Shavua tov. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. So good.
Shavua tov.